The hour of convening having arrived, all members of this House will please report to the floor and take your seats. All members, please report to the floor of the House. Take up positions. The clerk will ring the bell. All right, we're going to have the morning roll call. Wait a minute, is the Rules Committee back in? Okay. All right, we're going to have the morning roll call. All members present will please vote green to signify their presence in the chamber, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? The clerk will lock the machines. Doorkeepers will please close the doors and keep them closed. Well, good morning. Happy Friday. Hope nobody had any real early plans back home today. We'll have the devotion here in a minute, but I would continue to ask, as I have most days, to remember the people of Ukraine who are still so bravely defending themselves against a cruel, cruel tyrant, and they need our prayers. We will begin our day with scripture reading and prayer by the chaplain, after which we will pledge allegiance to the flag of our country. Our chaplain this morning will be introduced by the gentleman from the 72nd House District, Representative Josh Bonner. Representative Bonner.
Sorry about that. Good morning, colleagues. It's my honor to introduce our chaplain of the day, the Reverend George Dillard. Reverend Dillard is no stranger to the Capitol. He is the senior pastor at Peachtree City Christian Church, has been there since 1993. He is very involved in his community. He is a father, grandfather. His wife, Renee, they're both very active in our community back in Peachtree City. Reverend Dillard has spoken to this chamber a number of times, our friends over in the Senate, and has also presided over prayers in the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. So it is my honor today to introduce our chaplain of today, Reverend George Dillard.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here. I know with this beautiful Georgia weather that you would rather be outside than sequestered in this room. And so I hope that the predictions of the time that you have to spend here today are grossly over exaggerated. So, speaking of weather, a number of years ago, I was taking a backpacking trip on the Appalachian Trail. I was in college, and I know it's hard to imagine, but I was in good physical shape in those days. I played 2 sports in college. I played basketball and soccer, and a number of my friends said, let's go backpacking on the Appalachian Trail in February. And we went, spent a few days up there. On the way out, there were 7 of us, and the group was made up of gentlemen who were a little bit older than me, a couple of professors, and some guys who graduated before me, and they were not moving as quickly as I wanted to move. And so a friend of mine, my roommate actually, and I took off without them. We crossed over the ridge of the mountain, started down the trail, the descent on the shadowy side of the mountain. I don't know if that means anything to you, but what it does mean is that there was ice on the trail, and I came to a patch of ice that was about 20 feet long and about 3 feet wide, and there was a wall straight up and a wall straight down. And I did not have the equipment. I was not prepared for that. I was not a seasoned hiker, but I was confident. I was physically fit. I felt like I was fairly intelligent, but that would soon be proved to be wrong. And I started going across the ice, very slowly, very deliberately, with purpose. And about halfway across, one foot slipped, then the other foot slipped, and I did this silly little dance for a few seconds until I landed on my bottom, rolled over on my stomach, and slid off of the side of the trail and grabbed a rock that was hanging out, dangling 150 feet above the canyon floor. And my roommate was laughing. He thought that was funny. I almost died. You know, and you say, well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, I think sometimes when we tackle things, we are confident, we are sure of ourselves, we're really, really prepared, we think. But sometimes we just need to slow down, consider deeper wisdom, deeper truth. You know, in Joshua 1, it says, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. I tell people sometimes it's just as important what the scripture doesn't say as what it does say. See, it doesn't say be stupid, be reckless, be unprepared, or be self-centered, which I was all of those things. And it almost cost me my life. The people of the state of Georgia depend on you greatly to be strong, to be courageous, to be unafraid, and to not be discouraged. But at the same time, I would encourage you, do not be reckless, do not be unprepared, and do not be self-centered. Philippians 2 says, be like-minded, having the same love, being of one spirit, one mind, and do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interest of others. And I want to encourage you, we very much value your service. We appreciate your dedication. But I want to encourage you to remember that every one of us works for all of the citizens of Georgia, and that we should look at what is good and what is right. We need to take our time. We need to be deliberate. We need to be united. I just want to close with reminding you that of all the things that Jesus prayed about on the last night before he went to the cross, he prayed for unity. Father, make them one as you and I are one. If it's that important to Jesus, then I think it ought to be important to this body, to the people of this state, and to the people of this nation. I commend you for your service. I encourage you to be strong, be courageous, be unafraid, be wise, be deliberate, and be united. Would you stand and pray with me? Father, your word tells us that you are our help in ages past and our hope in days to come. And so, Father, we come to you today looking for our help and our hope. Father, bless this body with wisdom, with courage, with strength, with deliberation, but above all, unity, so that the service that they provide, that they render, that they give, will be beneficial to this state and to all who it affects. And we give thanks for this day, for it is the day that you have made, and we rejoice and are glad in it. In Jesus' name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Doorkeepers will unlock the doors. Members may greet the chaplain in the south anteroom. Chair recognizes Chairman Hogan, the chair of the Committee on Information and Audits.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Information and Audits has read the journal of the previous legislative day and found it to be correct. And furthermore, Mr. Speaker, if you could kick the person in the pants responsible for most of your troubles, you wouldn't sit for a month. Teddy Roosevelt.
Chairman Hogan, the chair of the Committee on Information and Audits, reports that the journal of the previous legislative day has been read and found to be correct. Is there any objection to the confirmation of the journal? The chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. The clerk will read the resolution establishing the order of business for the day.
Mr. Burns, 159 moves the following be established as the order of business during the first part of the period. Unanimous consents. Introduction of bills and resolutions. First reading and reference of House bills and resolutions. Second reading of bills and resolutions. Reports of standing committees. Third reading and passage of uncontested local bills and resolutions. First reading and reference of Senate bills and resolutions. Morning orders.
Is there any objection to the adoption of the resolution establishing the order of business for the day? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. First reading of bills and resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill 1488 by Representative Campbell, the 171st bill to be titled an act to amend an act to provide a new charter for the city of Pelham.
Intergovernmental coordination.
House Bill 1489 by Representative Montahana, the 17th, Gullett, the 19th, Gravely, the 67th, and Kelly, the 16th. Bill be titled an act to amend an act creating the Board of Commissioners of Paulding County.
Intergovernmental coordination.
House Bill 1490 by Representative Hagan of the 156th, Rich of the 97th, Jones of the 47th, Lim of the 99th, and Werkheiser of the 157th. Bill be titled an act to amend Chapter 2, Title 21 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to elections.
Special
primary
Committee
general.
on Election Integrity.
House Bill 1491 by Representative Montahana, the 17th, Powell, the 32nd, Stevens, the 164th, Gull, the 19th, Ridley, the 6th, and others. Bill be titled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 3 of Title 46 the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to generation, distribution.
Energy, Utilities, and
House
Telecommunications.
Bill 1492 by Representative Jones of the 47th and Cantrell of the 22nd. A bill being titled an act to amend an act incorporating the city of Milton.
Intergovernmental coordination.
House Bill 1493 by Representative Jones of the 47th and Cantrell of the 22nd. A bill being titled an act to amend an act incorporating the city of Milton.
Intergovernmental
House
coordination.
Bill 1494 by Representative Gull of the 19th, Martin of the 49th, Anderson of the 10th, Montana of the 17th, and Gamble of the 15th. Bill be titled an act to amend Chapter 3, Title 46 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to electrical services.
Energy, Utilities, and
House
Telecommunications.
Bill 1495 by Representative Dukes, the 154th. Bill be titled an act to amend an act creating the Board of Commissioners of Seminole County.
Intergovernmental coordination.
House Bill 1496 by Representative Gull of the 19th, Rich of the 97th, Anderson of the 10th, Dickey of the 140th, Gaines of the 117th, and others. Bill be titled an act to amend Chapter 3 and Title 4 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to livestock, hunting, and large.
Agriculture and Consumer
House
Affairs.
Bill 1497 by Representative Jones, the 47th, and Cantrell of the 22nd. A bill being titled an act to amend an act incorporating the city of Milton.
Intergovernmental coordination.
House Bill 1498 by Representative Holcomb of the 81st. Bill being titled an act to amend Code Section 5541 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to requirements as to extraordinary motions for new trial.
Judiciary, non-civil.
House Bill 1499 by Representative Park of the 101st, Administration of the 104th, Clark of the 108th, Rich of the 97th, McLean of the 100th, and others. Bill be titled an act to amend an act to continue and recreate the State Court of Gwinnett County.
Judiciary.
House Bill 1500 by Representative Washburn of the 101st, Burns of the 159th, Watson of the 172nd, Powell of the 32nd, Williamson of the 115th. Bill be titled an act to amend Title 43 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to professions and businesses.
Regulated
House
Industries.
Bill 1501 by Representative Leverett of the 33rd, Williamson of the 115th, Hatchett of the 150th. Bill be titled an act to amend Chapter 2, Title 39 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to regulation of employment of minors.
Industry and Labor.
House Bill 1502 by Representative Gaines of the 117th, Wiedauer of the 119th, Collins of the 68th, Dempsey of the 13th, Williamson of the 115th, and others. Bill being titled an act to amend Article 15 of Chapter 6 and Title 40 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to serious track offenses.
Judiciary, non-civil.
House Bill 1503 by Representative Evans of the 83rd, Oliver of the 82nd, Trenton of the 85th, Park of the 101st, Clark of the 108th, and others. Bill being titled an act to amend Article 2, Chapter 2, Title 46 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to general jurisdiction, powers, and duties of the Public Service Commission.
Energy, Utilities, and
House
Telecommunications.
Bill 1504 by Representative McLaurin of the 51st, Schofield of the 60th, Beverly of the 143rd, Mitchell of the 106th, Kennard of the 102nd, and others. Bill being titled an act to amend Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to state government.
Public Safety and Homeland Security.
House Bill 1505 by Representative Smith of the 18th, Gunner of the 8th, Scoggins the 14th, and Fleming of the 121st. Bill being titled an act to amend Code Section 16, 10, 23 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to impersonating a public
Judiciary,
officer.
non-civil.
House Bill 1506 by Representative Marin of the 96th, Park of the 101st, and Nguyen of the 89th. Bill be titled an act to amend Chapter 4, Title 1 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to holidays and observances.
State Planning and Community Affairs.
House Bill 1507 by Representative Montahana the 17th, Gullett of the 19th, Gravely the 67th, Kelly the 16th, Alexander the 66th, and others. Bill be titled an act to amend a former local constitutional amendment.
Intergovernmental coordination.
House Bill 1508 by Representative Wiedauer the 119th, Gullett of the 8th, Gravely the 67th, Gaines the 117th, Erhard of the 36th. Bill being titled Act to amend Chapter 11 of Title 15 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to juvenile code.
Juvenile
House
Justice.
Bill 1509 by Representative Gilliard, the 162nd, Stevens, the 164th, Jackson, the 165th, Hitchens, the 161st, Malo, the 163rd, and others. Bill being titled an Act to amend an act completely revising the laws relative to the governing authority of Chatham County.
Intergovernmental Coordination.
House Bill 1510 by Representative Gilliard, the 162nd, Stevens, the 164th, Jackson, the 165th, Hitchens, the 161st, Mallow, the 163rd, and others. Bill being titled an act to amend an act relating to the school system of the city of Savannah and Chatham County.
Intergovernmental Coordination.
House Bill 1511 by Representative Smith of the 18th Green, the 151st, Mathis, the 144th, Jenkins, the 132nd, and Evans, the 57th. Bill be titled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 2, Chapter 8, Title 12, the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to Georgia Comprehensive Solid Waste Management Act.
Natural Resources and Environment.
House Bill 1512 by Representative Powell, the 32nd, Benton, the 31st, and Tarver, the 2nd. Bill be titled an act to amend Chapter 3 of Title 50, the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to state flag, seal, and other symbols.
Rules.
House Bill 1513 by Representative Maynard, the 56th, and Limmer, the 99th. Bill be titled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 20, the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to elementary and secondary education.
Education.
House Bill 1514 by Representative Maynard, the 56th, and Bennett, the 94th. Bill be titled an act to amend Chapter 33 of Title 43, the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to physical therapists.
Health and Human
House
Services.
Bill 1515 by Representative Bentley, the 139th, Martin, the 49th, Dempsey, the 13th, Jackson, the 128th, Paulo, the 32nd, and others. Bill be titled an act to amend Code Section 23, 411 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to definitions regarding tuition equalization grants.
Higher Education.
House Bill 1516 by Representative Gaines, the 117th, Weedower, the 119th, Fryer, the 118th. The bill be titled an act to amend Part 10 of Article 7, Chapter 3 of Title 12, the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to Georgia Music Hall of Fame Authority.
Creative Arts and Entertainment.
House Bill 1518 by Representative Parrish of the 142nd, Hutchinson, the 107th, Beverly, the 143rd, Davis, the 87th, Schofield, the 60th. Bill be titled an act to amend Title 31 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to health.
Health and Human Services.
House Bill 1519 by Representative Knight of the 130th, Newton, the 123rd, Jaspers, the 11th, Hawkins of the 27th, Hatchet of the 150th. Bill be titled an act to amend Chapter 24, Title 33 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to insurance generally.
Special Committee on Access to Quality Health Care.
House Bill 1520 by Representative Hawkins, the 27th, Jaspers, the 11th, Cooper, the 43rd, Bentley, the 139th, Dempsey, the 13th, and others. Bill be titled an act to amend Title 31 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to health.
Human Relations and Aging.
House Resolution 896 by Representative Hitchens, 161st, Clark, the 147th, Bonner, the 72nd, Prince, the 127th, Williams, the 168th. A resolution creating the House Study Committee on Alternative Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder.
Defense and Veterans Affairs.
House Resolution 897 by Representative Hitchens, the 161st, and Werkheiser, the 157th. A resolution honoring the life of Sheriff Quinn Rush and dedicating a road in his memory.
Transportation.
House Resolution 898 by Representative Metz of the 55th. A resolution recognizing and condemning threats of violence against historically black colleges and universities.
Higher Education.
House Resolution 908 by Representative Schofield of the 60th, Beverly the 143rd, Bodie the 62nd, Scott of the 76th, and McLean of the 100th. A resolution proposing amending the Constitution so as to create the Family and Medical Leave Insurance Fund.
Industry and Labor.
Senate Bill 403 by Senator Watson the 1st, Albers the 56th, Cowser the 46th, Robertson of the 29th, Kirkpatrick the 32nd, and others. Bill be titled an act to amend Title 37 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated related to mental health.
Health and Human Services.
Senate Resolution 504 by Senator Mullis the 53rd, Hatchett the 50th, Anderson the 24th, Gooch the 51st. A resolution recognizing the significant role that Native American tribes have played in Georgia.
State Planning and Community Affairs.
That completes first readers.
Second reading of bills and resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill 1475 by Representative Leverett of the 33rd, a bill to create a Board of Elections and Registration for Elbert County. House Bill 1476 by Representative Leverett of the 33rd, a bill to amend an act to amend, consolidate, and supersede the several acts incorporating the City of Colbert, House Bill 1477 by Representative Stevens of the 164th, a bill relating to general provisions relative to coroners, House Bill 1478 by Representative Ridley of the 6th, Powell of the 32nd, Corbett of the 174th, Perkle of the 155th, Tarvin of the 2nd, a bill relating to transfer of vehicle to or from dealer, records to be kept by dealers, electronic filing, and application for title where dealer located, House Bill 1479 by Representative Corbett of the 174th, Watson of the 172nd, Houston of the 170th, Burns of the 159th, Dickey of the 140th, a bill relating to the practice of professional forestry, House Bill 1480 by Representative Gamble of the 15th, Scoggins of the 14th, Byrd of the 20th, Kelly of the 16th, a bill relating to employment and security benefits, House Bill 1481 by Representative Jaspers of the 11th, a bill relating to registration and licensing of manufacturers, distributors, and dealers, and issuance of manufacturer headquarters, distributor, and dealer plates, House Bill 1482 by Representative Irwin of the 28th, Corbett of the 174th, Yerta of the 152nd, Chokas of the 138th, Dubnik of the 29th, and others, a bill relating to low wealth capital outlay grants, local school systems, and criteria for eligibility, House Bill 1483 by Representative Barton of the 5th, Hatchett of the 150th, Cooper of the 43rd, Hutchinson of the 107th, Dempsey of the 13th, and others, a bill relating to licensing provisions regarding professional counselors, social workers, and marriage and family therapists, House Bill at 1484 by Representative Hawkins of the 27th, Bennett of the 94th, Gravely of the 67th, Cooper of the 43rd, Green of the 151st, and others, a bill relating to medical assistance, House Bill 1485 by Representative Smith of the 18th, Deloach of the 167th, Green of the 151st, Jenkins of the 132nd, Evans of the 157th, a bill relating to Georgia Comprehensive Solid Waste Management Act, House Bill 1486 by Representative Laricki of the 169th, Sains of the 180th, Ridley of the 6th, Hill of the 3rd, Yerta of the 152nd, a bill relating to exemptions from sales and use tax, House Bill 1487 by Representative Fry of the 118th, Evans of the 83rd, Drenner of the 85th, Schofield of the 60th, Lewis Ward of the 109th, and others, a bill relating to public utilities and public transportation, House Bill 1517 by Representative Schofield of the 60th, Beverly of the 143rd, Bodie of the 62nd, Scott of the 76th, McLean of the 100th, a bill relating to hard labor and industrial relations, House Resolution 878 by Representative Laricki of the 169th, Perkle of the 155th, Burchett of the 176th, LaHood of the 175th, Corbett of the 174th, resolution recognizing Private First Class Charles C. Day, Sergeant First Class Jerome Day, and dedicating a bridge in their honor, House Resolution 879 by Representative Stevens of the 164th, resolution urging the 117th Congress and the Georgia Congressional Delegation to support the United States Innovation and Competition Act and the America Competes Act of 2022, House Resolution 880 by Representative Schofield of the 60th, Smith of the 18th, Thomas of the 65th, Kirby of the 114th, Scott of the 76th, a resolution encouraging support of urban farming by local governments, House Resolution 881 by Representative Jackson of the 128th, Belton of the 112th, Williams of the 168th, Wade of the 9th, Irwin of the 28th, and others, resolution encouraging each public school in this state to study the civil rights era and related subjects described herein to affirm the commitment of the free peoples of the state to reject bigotry, House Resolution 894 by Representative Camp of the 131st, Lim of the 99th, the resolution proposing the amendment to the Constitution so as to provide that the General Assembly shall be entitled to specifically appropriate all unanticipated federal funding allocated to the state for a fiscal year if the sum of all such funds exceeds $100 million for a fiscal year, House Resolution 895 by Representative Chokas of the 138th, the resolution creating the House Study Committee on electric vehicle charging tariffs, Senate Bill 337 by Senator Walker III of the 20th, Gooch of the 51st, Kirkpatrick of the 32nd, Anna Duarte of the 31st, Hickman of the 4th, and others, a bill relating to vacation of office, Senate Bill 456 by Senator Thompson of the 14th, Kirkpatrick of the 32nd, Miller of the 49th, Gooch of the 51st, Hatchett of the 50th, and others, a bill relating to health, Senate Bill 496 by Senator Burke of the 11th, Watson of the 1st, Tillery of the 19th, Kirkpatrick of the 32nd, Hofstetler of the 52nd, and others, a bill relating to death investigations, Senate Bill 500 by Senator Strickland of the 17th, Walker the 3rd of the 20th, Kennedy of the 18th, Cowser of the 46th, Jones the 2nd of the 22nd, and others, a bill relating to commerce, Senate Bill 511 by Senator Anderson of the 24th, Duggan of the 30th, Mullis of the 53rd, Miller of the 49th, Walker the 3rd of the 20th, and others, a bill relating to creation of county boards of equalization duties, review of assessments and appeals, Senate Bill 514 by Senator Dixon of the 45th, Miller of the 49th, Goodger of the 51st, Albers of the 56th, Mullis of the 53rd, and others, a bill relating to elementary and secondary education, Senate Bill 554 by Senator Tillery of the 19th, a bill to amend an act providing for the election of members of the Troyland County Board of Education, Senate Bill 555 by Senator Tillery of the 19th, a bill to amend an act creating Board of Commissioners of Troyland County, Senate Bill 559 by Senator Burns of the 23rd, a bill to amend an act creating a new charter of the City of Thompson, Senate Bill 560 by Senator Jones of the 10th, Butler of the 55th, Anderson of the 43rd, Davenport of the 44th, Jackson of the 41st, and others. A bill to amend an act created and established in DeKalb County districts from which the members of the DeKalb County Board of Education shall be elected. Senate Bill 570 by Senator Sims of the 12th. A bill to amend an act to revise and restate the law relating to the Sumter County Board of Education and School Superintendent through second readers.
Reports of standing committees. The clerk will read.
Representative Dubnik of the 29th District, Chairman of the Committee on Education, submitted the following report. Mr. Speaker, the Committee on Education has added in consideration the following bills to the House and instructed me to report same back to the House with the following recommendations. House Bill 1295, due passed by committee substitute. House Bill 1357, due passed by committee substitute, respectfully submitted. Representative Dubnik of the 29th District, Chairman. Representative Rick Jaspers of the 11th District, Chairman of the Committee on Transportation, submitted the following report. Mr. Speaker, Committee on Transportation has set under consideration the following bills to the House. It's instructed me to report same back to the House with the following recommendations. House Bill 1438, due pass. Respectfully submitted, Representative Rick Jaspers of the 11th District, Chairman. President Jan Tankersley, the 160th District, Chairman of the Committee on Intergovernmental Coordination, submitted the following report. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Intergovernmental Coordination, Locals, had in consideration the following bills to the House and the Senate. It has instructed me to report the same back to the House with the following recommendations. House Bill 1407, due pass. House Bill 1431, due pass. House Bill 1432, due pass. House Bill 1444, due pass. House Bill 1463, due pass. House Bill 1466, due pass. House Bill 1469, due pass. House Bill 1470, due pass. House Bill 1472, due pass. Senate Bill 547, due pass. Senate Bill 548, due pass. Senate Bill 549, due pass. Respectfully submitted. Representative Jan Tankersley of the 160th District, Chairman. That completes the reading of the reports of standing committees.
Okay, we're about to get on to some work here. We're going on to the local calendar. Going on to the local calendar, third reading and passage of uncontested local bills.
You're good.
If there is no objection, we will vote on the local calendar as a whole with a recorded vote. Hearing none, it is so ordered. The clerk will read the local calendar.
House Bill 1407 by Representative Green of the 151st, City of Dawson. House Bill 1431 by Representative Hitchens, the 161st, City of Rincon. House Bill 1432 by Representative Wade of the 9th, Dawson County. House Bill 1444 by Representative Nix of the 69th, Goetta Judicial Circuit. House Bill 1463 by Representative Green of the 151st, Dougherty County. House Bill 1466 by Representative Green of the 151st, Dougherty County. House Bill 1469 by Representative Benton of the 31st, City of Jefferson. House Bill 1470 by Representative Ralston of the 7th, Gilmer County. House Bill 1472 by Representative Seaball of the 34th, City of Kennesaw. Senate Bill 547 by Senator Dugan of the 30th, City of Carrollton, Senate Bill 548 by Senator Dugan of the 30th, City of Carrollton. Senate Bill 549 by Senator Dugan of the 30th, City of Carrollton.
Any objection to the previous question being ordered on the local calendar? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bills? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall these bills now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bills on the local calendar will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of the bills on the local calendar. The ayes are 147. The nays are 11. These bills, having received the requisite constitutional majority, are therefore passed. I've got members complaining about the level of noise in here that they can't hear. And I'm having trouble hearing. And that's not a good thing to do. So let's keep it down. If you got to have a conversation, we got plenty of places here. It's even a beautiful day. You can go outside. You might choose not to come back in if you do that, but on Thursday, March 3rd, 2022, the House failed to adopt House Resolution 594 by the requisite constitutional majority. The lady from the 70th District served notice of a motion to reconsider the action of the House in failing to give House Resolution 594 the requisite constitutional majority. Now is the time for the lady to pursue the motion if she so desires. What purpose does Chairman Smith rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I so move that we reconsider our actions of House Resolution 594 to give the requisite constitutional majority vote.
On the lady's motion that this House reconsider its action in failing to give House Resolution 594 a requisite constitutional majority. All those in favor of reconsideration will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative Kennard rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that I lost sleep last night, Mr. Speaker, because of my regret over my no vote yesterday? It was a mistake. And
I would have.
Yes, sir.
I'm serious.
Yes, sir.
You denied help to the people of Georgia in the toughest time of their life.
This is
I
my
don't like
apology.
the editorialize, okay?
Okay. This is my apology. Is it not true, sir, that I regret that vote?
If the gentleman so states, I think he's sincere in making that statement. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the lady's motion. The ayes are 147, the nays are 9. The motion carries and the House has reconsidered its action, and the resolution will go back on the general calendar. We're going on now to morning orders. Morning orders. Let's limit morning orders to 2 minutes each today. That limit will be strictly enforced. Chair recognizes the chairman of the House Ethics Committee, Chairman Nix, for a morning order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, I would like to bring your attention to an article that I had put on your desk this morning. The ugly truth behind those fun gambling ads, and it further states that we're looking at a national crisis of gambling addiction. Now, we are approaching crossover day, and you can bet that that old gambling monster is going to rise up out of the dark and going to come strolling in here pretty soon. Before you commit, I would like for you to read this, because you're going to be told that if you pass gambling laws, all of our problems will go away in this state. That everything will have so much money we can adopt Alabama.
That wouldn't take much, you know.
But seriously, please read this article. This talks about the devastation that gambling has on individuals, on families, and on communities. It's written by somebody who was an executive in the gambling business, and he talks about the fact that they prey on the addictive factor of gambling. At the bottom of the second page, it talks about brain chemistry. Said the neuroscience of gambling is exactly the same as other addictive behaviors such as drugs, alcohol, sex, and eating. So we're talking about mental health and how important it is. Let's don't try to fix it in one area and then cause all kind of problems in the other area. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Representative Rick Williams for a morning order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I come to you this morning about trains. If we could talk about trains for just a moment. I know probably a lot of you are like me. We got them as gifts when we were small. Some of you got electric trains. I just got a regular train. We lived so far in the country, we didn't have electricity. So, trains have been good, and we all need them, and they move freight, but we don't need them 3 miles long. I have a resolution urging the Federal Railroad Administration to follow through with their recommendation that trains not exceed 8,500 feet long. Now, it's a public safety issue in a lot of small towns. All you have is 3 or 4 train crossings, and this 3 mile long train shuts down the whole town. So I'll have this resolution at my desk if any of you would like to stop by and sign it. It's just urging the Federal Railroad Administration to follow through with this efforts to regulate train length. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Cantrell for a morning order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I rise this morning to say words that I never dreamed would ever come out of my mouth. I agree with Speaker Nancy Pelosi. I agree with Speaker Nancy Pelosi for the first time, and I join my voice with hers in urging President Biden to suspend all imports of Russian oil during this invasion of our friends in Ukraine. I think we can find something we all agree with. Every dollar we spend on Russian oil is a dollar spent supporting their efforts against Ukraine. So I want to encourage all of us to contact our congressmen and our senators and urge them all together. Let's join together in suspending all imports of oil from Russia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, we're now going on to the rules calendar. Going on to the rules calendar. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1183.
House Bill 1183 by Representative Gunner of the 8th and others to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 6 and Title 17 the official code of Georgia annotated relating to bond and recognizances so as to provide for an increase in the time allotted to try a criminal case in judicial emergencies. This bill having referred to the Committee on Judiciary and Non-Civil, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Gunter to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, 1183 is a Judicial Council bill to clean up some language in an act that was passed back in 2018. There was a couple of Scrivener's errors in it that made it very confusing about the return of a bond when a fugitive isn't returned back to the court. It revises the timeline. It gives the bondsman more time to bring the fugitive back to the court. It gives them incentive because they get an increase in return of the portion of the bond that they put up. And I'll answer any questions if you have any on the bill, but basically it's just a cleanup bill of that language.
You do have a question. Do you care to yield?
I'll yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Cannon to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do you yield?
I yield.
Do you consider this bill to be criminal justice reform?
In a certain manner, yes.
You have no further questions.
I yield the well and ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 1183. The ayes are 157, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Off the supplemental rules calendar, the chair will have the clerk read the caption to Senate Bill 472.
Senate Bill 472 by Senator Kennedy VIII to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 2 of Title 46 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to organization and members of the Public Service Commission so as to change the description of the election districts for members of the Public Service Commission.
Chair recognizes Chairman Rich to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of the House. I am so happy to rise today to present to you Senate Bill 472 because I believe that this may be my last legislative action as arising from my chairing the Legislative and Congressional Reapportionment Committee this last year. So we are at the end of our time frame. As we all know, qualifying begins on Monday. Senate Bill 472 is legislation that redraws the lines for all 5 of our Public Service Commission districts. These maps were drawn by our Joint Office of Reapportionment and were approved by all 5 of the Public Service Commissioners. These maps, these lines readjust the population for these residency districts. These are different. These are statewide elections, and we are redrawing residency districts. They create the pools from which Public Service Commissioners may run for office for statewide election. These maps provide for a population deviation of plus or minus 1%. The maps were necessary, of course, because of the population changes and shifts over the last 10 years. And with that, I will yield for a couple of questions in case we need any clarification.
Do you yield for a question?
I do.
Chair recognizes Representative Stacey Evans to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the lady yield?
I do.
You mentioned that these new districts will go into effect so that the voters can vote for PSC members on a statewide basis. Is that right?
That is correct.
Will you yield for one further question?
Yes.
Isn't it true that right now there is litigation pending that the way that we do these PSC elections by statewide vote should be overturned as unconstitutional in violation of several different rules, and we very well may soon be voting by district, and we would be stuck with these districts for that as well. Is that true?
No, it is not entirely true. It is absolutely true that plaintiffs have alleged that the way that we elect our public service commissioners is incorrect and unconstitutional, but I do not believe that will be overturned. These public service commissioners have always been elected statewide.
Will you yield for one further?
One more.
Recognizing that we don't agree on how this litigation is going to turn out.
Yes.
If it is overturned, this is the map that will be used for the new district votes for PSC, if
Yes.
that is the result.
Yes, this is the map that's being passed along with all other maps for redistricting because we have to operate and run elections this year. And yes, that is correct.
Do you yield for any further questions?
Mr. Speaker, I will yield the well. I believe that there are others who wish to speak to this and that some of the issues may be clarified through further testimony.
Lady has yielded the well. We do have other members who wish to be heard. Chair recognizes Representative Hughley to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I rise to talk today about the Georgia Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission is one of several boards and commissions required by our state constitution. It regulates public utilities such as gas and electricity, making it one of the most important governmental bodies for pocketbook issues affecting everyday Georgians. Article 4, Section 1, Paragraph 1 of the Georgia Constitution provides that the commission shall consist of 5 members elected by the people to staggered 6-year terms, but it gives us, the General Assembly, the duty of providing for the time and manner of electing commission members. We have the constitutional power and the duty to say whether elections for Public Service Commission will be held in May, November, or some other time. We have the power to require partisan elections or nonpartisan elections, and we have the power to require that elections be held by districts or that they be held statewide. Currently, the General Assembly has chosen to provide by statute that all 5 commissioners are to be elected statewide in partisan elections, and that they must live in one of the 5 residency districts in order to qualify for the ballot. Those residency districts are what SB 472 draws. But I want to give you a little history today because it wasn't always this way. The Public Service Commission dates back to 1879 when the General Assembly created a railroad commission for the purpose of regulating railroad passenger and freight rates and services. At the time, it consisted of 3 members appointed by the governor. In 1906, the General Assembly provided that members of the Railroad Commission would be elected statewide rather than appointed by the governor. In 1907, we expanded the commission from 3 to 5 members. In 1922, we changed the name of the Railroad Commission to the Public Service Commission to reflect an increasingly variety of services and utilities included under the Commission's jurisdiction. In 1943, we gave the Commission constitutional status, which insulated the Commission somewhat from politics. But still, we provided by statute that the commissioners would be elected statewide. In 1998, we created residential districts for members of the Public Service Commission. Under that statute, the state was divided into 5 districts, and each member of the Public Service Commission was required to live in one of those 5 districts in order to run. I was in the General Assembly at the time, as were a few of my colleagues that are still here, I remember that the purpose of instituting residency districts was to ensure that commission members would come from more than just a concentrated metro Atlanta area, that they could come from all areas of the state because this commission regulates industry that affects all Georgians regardless of where they live. But still, it was provided by statute that the commissioners would be elected statewide. We withdrew the residency districts in 2002 and in 2012, but still we provided by statutes that commissioners would be elected statewide. In the 143 history of the Public Service Commission, only one African American has ever been elected statewide. That was David Burgess, who was appointed by Governor Barnes to fill a vacancy in 1998 and was elected in 2000. He was defeated in his bid for re-election in 2006, and every other commissioner to the commission over the years has been white. As some of you know, there is an ongoing lawsuit challenging the statewide method of electing members of the Public Service Commission. That case is called Rose versus Roethlisberger. The plaintiffs are 4 African American voters, and they claim that statewide elections dilute minority voting strength in our state, where minority voters make up more than 40% of the state's population, but have 0 representation on the Public Service Commission. I am opposing SB 472, my dear colleagues, and I urge you to do the same because it does not reflect the diversity of our great state. There's an old saying, when you know better, you need to do better. And I think it's time for us to do better. I think it's time for us to give minority voters an opportunity to elect candidates of their choice to the commission, rather than perpetuating 143 years of exclusion and unfairness. We have the power to provide for fair elections, and we should use it. SB 472 is unfair to the people of Georgia, and I urge that you vote no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my colleagues, I yield the will.
Chair recognizes Representative Park to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in opposition to Senate Bill 472 because it violates the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which prohibits all forms of racial discrimination in voting. As Representative Hughley mentioned, as Representative Stacey Evans noted, as some of y'all may know, which bears repeating, there is an ongoing federal lawsuit challenging the statewide method of electing members of the Public Service Commission. That case is called Rose v. Roethlisberger. The plaintiffs are 4 African American voters, and they claim that statewide elections for the Public Service Commission dilute minority voting strength in our state. Only one person of color has ever been elected to the commission in its 143-year history, and that was more than 20 years ago. In late January, the court in that case issued a ruling indicating that the at-large method of electing members of the Public Service Commission likely violates Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. A trial is set for June, and the court is likely to rule before our November elections. Given the court's ruling, it makes no sense for us to adopt SB 472, which perpetuates statewide elections for members of the PSC. We would be adopting a statute that is likely unlawful and discriminatory, and it could be seen as thumbing our nose at the court. We should instead heed the court's warning and switch to elections by district. My colleagues in the redistricting committee offered an amendment to do just that. I also believe that the residency districts created by SB 472 are discriminatory. Under the current map, there are 2 majority-minority districts, Districts 2 and 3. District 3 is anchored by the city of Atlanta, and District 2 is anchored by Gwinnett County. When we drew the residency requirements in 2012, neither of these districts were majority minority. But Georgia's minority population exploded over the last decade, and we now have 2 majority minority districts. Senate Bill 472 would dismantle one of those districts, District 2, the Gwinnett District. To the majority party, please stop messing with Gwinnett County. Stop undermining the will of Gwinnett voters. Y'all do know that approximately 1 in 10 Georgians live in Gwinnett County because we are a great place to live, work, and play. As the voters of Gwinnett County were instrumental in electing President Biden, along with United States Senators John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock, Gwinnett voters will be instrumental in determining who will serve in all of our statewide constitutional offices. So I would assert that it may be in the best interest of the majority party to vote no to SB 472. SB 472 moves Gwinnett from District 2 to District 4, which is dominated by mostly white areas in northeast Georgia. District 2, meanwhile, takes in mostly white areas in rural South Georgia and flips from majority minority to majority white. Let's be clear, this is no accident. SB 472 wasn't even introduced as a bill until after the federal court ruled in January that the residency districts probably violate Section 2. Whoever drew these new districts saw the writing on the wall. They realized that the residency districts could soon become election districts, and they drafted SB 472 to take away minority electoral opportunity just as they were about to win it in court. Our redistricting guidelines require all plans to comply with Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This one does not, and we haven't even heard an argument that it does. I'm going to vote no on this discriminatory bill, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the will.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. We have a minority report. By rule, 20 minutes for the minority report. And to give it, chair recognizes the leader of the minority caucus, Leader Beverly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 472. The Senate Republicans' map for redrawing the residency districts used by members of the Georgia's Public Service Commission, because this bill has been advanced under false pretenses. Our colleagues in the Senate justified Senate Bill 472 as necessary as the 2020 census to bring those residency districts into compliance with the one person, one vote principle of the Constitution that we've all heard so much about during the redistricting process. But the one person, one vote principle does not apply to residency districts. The Supreme Court decided that in 1975, a case called Dallas versus Reese, one person, one vote is thus not a reason to redraw the PSC residency districts. Even if the one person, one vote did apply, there would be no reason to redraw the PSC's residency districts because the population deviation, which my colleague spoke of, remain still, to this day, remain within constitutional limits after the 2020 census. Now, our colleagues in the Senate never gave us the population of those existing districts under the 2020 census. But we asked the LCRO to provide those numbers, Legislative Congressional Reapportionment Office, LCR, to provide those numbers, and we discovered that the overall deviation in the existing map is below the 10% threshold that is presumptively constitutional. So even if the one person, one vote principle did apply, it wouldn't justify SB 472. Our Senate colleagues also told us that the population shifts in Georgia required that they radically reconfigure the existing districts. Their map actually shifts 44 counties, more than a quarter of the state's 159 counties into new districts, 44 counties. But that justification just doesn't add up. The Georgia House Democratic Caucus drew a plan that shifts only 13 counties, has lower population deviation, splits fewer cities, protects all incumbents, and maintains the core of the existing districts much better than their plan does. And we offered this alternative map that better meets the needs of their stated goals and justification for SB 472. But they did not adopt it. No. The answer is no. Why not? Because the justification given to us and to the people of Georgia by our state Senate colleagues was merely a pretext for their real motive, a subterfuge. Let me tell you what's really going on here. In late January, a federal court issued a ruling indicating that the at-large method of electing members of the Public Service Commission likely violates Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. This means that the PSC residency districts could soon become election districts. SB 472 was introduced only after the federal court made that clear. Why? Because lo and behold, population shifts over the last decade in Georgia have turned two districts that were majority white in 2012 into majority minority districts by 2020. One anchored in Atlanta, the other anchored in Gwinnett County. As my colleague Brett Park said, leave Gwinnett alone. SB 472 dismantles the Gwinnett district, restoring it to majority white status and eliminating the minority voters' electoral opportunity just as they were about to win it in court. That didn't just happen by accident. Make no mistake, SB 472 is an apparent response to the federal court's ruling. It is intended to prevent minority voters in Georgia from having an opportunity to elect members of the Public Service Commission. It is an intentional effort to dilute minority voting strength. And it violates the Federal Voting Rights Act of the in the United States Constitution. My fellow members of the House, my fellow Georgians, we should not, we must not have any part of that. Intentional racial discrimination is wrong, no matter what party affiliation you happen to be in. You know that? Now I appeal to your conscience and to your vote. I urge you to vote no on SB 472. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield it well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. We have the chairman's time now, also set by rule at 20 minutes. Chair recognizes Chairman Gaines for the chairman's time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to point out several things that have been brought up by the minority party and clarify some information that I think has been inaccurate. First off, no member of this body has introduced legislation to elect the PSC by district that I'm aware of, and to try to make this change at the 11th hour before qualifying begins on Monday is not a good decision. Again, there is pending litigation, and that will move through the courts, but to try to do this at the 11th hour when qualifying starts on Monday, to move it by district, is not wise. Additionally, it would take a constitutional amendment to change it. The courts have interpreted since the beginning that where it says elected by the people, that is statewide. So it would take a constitutional amendment, something, again, no member of this body's introduced, and to try to put an amendment on this bill in committee, which failed, or to try to change it at this point does not make sense. There was also the point brought up by the minority party that there's only been one African American to ever serve on the Public Service Commission. Brian Kemp just appointed Fitz Johnson, and he's up this year. And so there was a point saying there's zero African American representation, and that is not true. Again, Fitz Johnson's on the Public Service Commission today and is up for re-election this year. Additionally, the minority leader brought up that currently we have 10% deviation. He suggested that's within the constitutional limits. The courts have said that we must get as close as practical, and that the courts have ruled that 10% is not good enough. By keeping the maps as they are currently today, for example, District 1 would have 133,000 less people, which these are residency districts. That means 133,000 less people would have the opportunity to run for Public Service Commission from that district. By keeping the maps as they are today, we would not be allowing candidates in these districts to run and to serve statewide. So I think it's important that we pass Senate Bill 472 here today and send this on to the governor's desk. Mr. Speaker, I'll yield the well and ask for the body's favorable consideration.
Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of Senate Bill 472 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative Mary Frances Williams rise?
Parliamentary question,
State your
Mr. Speaker.
inquiry.
Mr. Speaker and colleagues, isn't it true that it's never too late to do the right thing?
What purpose does Representative Deloach rise?
Parliamentary inquiry,
State your
Mr.
inquiry.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, isn't it true that when the current law that created residency districts was passed, Tom Murphy was Speaker of this House and Roy Barnes was the governor of this state? And the fact is, had they voted by districts, they feared that a Republican might be elected.
There was a lot of that going around back then. What purpose does Representative McLeod rise?
Parliamentary
State your
inquiry.
inquiry.
Is it true that my colleagues have used the same method to draw this map as they did in Gwinnett?
I assume it was, I wasn't there when either of them were drawn. I can't answer that question. What purpose does Chairman Setzler rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr.
State
Speaker.
your inquiry.
No, isn't it true that procedurally we never would mention names in this body, but if we took the vote count and took the names of folks who voted on that bill that Representative Deloach alluded to, there'd be members in this body who may be contemplating a red vote who actually voted green when this was put in place. Isn't that true, Mr. Speaker?
If the gentleman so states, I'm sure he believes it to be true. Final parliamentary inquiry. What purpose does Representative Paris rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, is it not true that two wrongs don't make a right? And can we please start living in the present and stop referring to future, past mistakes of past legislatures?
Well, I think if everyone agreed to do that, it would be good. That would require both sides doing it. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of Senate Bill 472. The ayes are 97. The nays are 68. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. What purpose does Chairman Gaines rise?
To make a motion.
State your motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we immediately transmit Senate Bill 472 to the Senate.
Chairman Gaines has moved that the Senate Bill 472 be immediately transmitted to the Senate. There is objection. Does the gentleman move? Gentleman moves. All those in favor of immediate transmittal will vote aye. Those opposed to immediate transmittal will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does The minority caucus whip, Rise.
Is it not true? I was immediately pressed my button to ask for the intent to serve notice for reconsideration for this bill.
It is true that the first person that came on the board here was Chairman Gaines, and you were second.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What purpose does Representative Cannon rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that there is a rush measure happening from the Republican side right now that has to do with Sunday's deadline and that has not been spoken to on this floor?
I'm not sure I understand your deadline or your question. You might want to talk to Chairman Gaines about that. What purpose does Representative Wilkerson rise?
I would like to ask from a ruling from the chair if every bill should be able to be reconsidered prior to being transmitted out of this chamber.
The rules of the House provide that that has to be taken up immediately, and it was taken up in a timely manner. That's the ruling of the chair. Have all members voted on the motion? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the passage of, or on the motion for immediate transmittal, the ayes are 96, the nays are 68, and Senate Bill 472 is on its way to the Georgia State Senate. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1178.
House Bill 1178 by Representative Bonner, the 72nd, and others to be titled an act to amend Part 5 Article 16 of Chapter 2 entitled 20 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to review of removal of students in elementary and secondary education so as to provide for the protection of the fundamental rights of parents to direct the upbringing and education of their minor children. This bill having referred to the Committee on Education, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes the governor's floor leader, Representative Bonner, to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning I rise to present House Bill 1178, the Parents' Bill of Rights. This is a key priority in Governor Kemp's education agenda. Now, colleagues, my wife and I have been married almost 24 years. In fact, our 24th wedding anniversary is April 4th, sine die. And I can't tell you how much I look forward to spending that anniversary with each and every one of you. Now, one of the many lessons I've learned over those years of our marriage is that it worked best when there was open communication and transparency. As our children came along, we learned that our family worked best when we were all working together to move in the same direction instead of working against each other. I believe that public education works best when we apply those same principles of open communication and transparency. House Bill 1178 does just that. First, this bill places into black letter law the rights of parents we all know to be true. It codifies parents' rights and the responsibility of the local school system in one place. Currently, most are addressed through board rule, which is easily undone. The law is not. This will make it easier for districts and parents to understand their roles. Second, it centralizes and streamlines the process for parents to obtain information regarding their child and provides a framework for schools to provide that information. This bill is not meant to be punitive in any way. It does not single out an individual teacher, school, or school board. It was drafted in conjunction with educators and parents from a cross-section of our state. I believe this bill will encourage a greater partnership between parents and teachers. And I think that we can all agree that education works best in a community where parents play an active role alongside our teachers in preparing our children for success. And Mr. Speaker, with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Do you yield for questions?
I do.
Chair recognizes Representative Cannon to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do you yield?
I do.
How does this bill impact the special rights that those who are in special ed have right now? You know, the parents' rights of special education?
It does not impact those those rights to my knowledge.
Do you yield again
do.
to clarify the question?
Sure.
So how does this line up beside those? Does this give more rights to parents of students who are not a part of the special ed program than those who are in the special ed program?
It does not give anyone any more or less rights that are in place right now. Thank you for the question.
You further yield?
I do.
Chair recognizes Chairman Carson to your left for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Thank you for bringing this bill. Isn't it true that not only is the intent, but also what is achieved in this bill is greater transparency for Georgia's parents?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. You're exactly correct.
Thank you very much.
I'll yield for one more, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Chairman Martin to your right for a question.
The floor leader yield.
I do.
To follow up on the lady's question earlier, I believe what she might have been referring to is there are special rights, is it not true, given if your child is in a special education or special needs program and has a special plan that exists today in current law? Isn't that true?
Correct, like an IEP.
And isn't it true that would be a subset of all the students in our population?
Correct.
And your bill today is for the entire population. So isn't it true that this bill takes nothing away from those subset of students and their parents' rights, but in fact gives them additional rights as regular students in the school system that all other students and parents would have?
That's correct.
So this addresses the superset of all of the students in the school and does not negatively impact the rights that adhere today to those students in special education and their parents' rights.
That's correct. Thank you for the clarification.
I just wanted to, I thought that's what you and I had spoken before. Thank you for the answer.
With that, Mr. Speaker, I will yield the well and ask for your favorable consideration.
Gentleman has yielded the well. We have other members who wish to be heard on the bill. I would ask members to bear in mind that the Rules Committee has voted to limit debate to a total of 1 hour on each of these measures on the calendar today. That time will be allocated equally between each side, a total of 30 minutes for those in opposition to be allocated between themselves as they see fit. Chair recognizes Representative Stacey Evans to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I rise in opposition to House Bill 1178. As a parent, I have a 4th grader and I have a, I don't even know what we call it, 2-year-old preschool, whatever that is. And I think the parent-teacher relationship is extremely important, and I think that we are really putting it at risk even further than it already is with this bill. Tensions are high already. That relationship, that antagonistic relationship that has been developing between teachers and parents, it's been going on for a while. I know every time we have a parent-teacher conference for our daughter, we don't have them for our son yet. 2-year-old preschool doesn't have parent-teacher conferences. But we always are very upfront. We say, we are on your side. We don't want you to tell us what you think we want to hear. We want to hear the good, the bad, the ugly. And I have felt compelled to say that every year that she's been in school, which has been at least 5 in K through 12. And I say that because there has been this distrust, the parents siding with the kids and not trusting the teachers. And this only makes that worse. And that's my overarching concern about this piece of legislation. But I have a couple of specifics that I also want to talk about. Number one being, under this bill, we are going to allow parents to decide that their minor children, which is defined as individuals under the age of 18, we are going to allow the parents to opt those children out of sex education. First of all, we don't define sex education, which is a problem. But number two, the age of consent to sex in this state is 16. So 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds legally can decide whether to have sex or not, but their parents get to decide whether they should have sex education. That is really bad policy. I love my daughter, and I think we have a great relationship, and I hope that she will always be willing to come and talk to me about sex, and I hope my son does too. But they might not. And everybody in here knows that there are children that either don't have the kind of relationship with their parents where they can go and talk to them about these things, or they just don't want to. I would like to think that if we are under state policy going to say that 16 and 17-year-olds can make their own decisions about having sex, that we would let them sit in a classroom and have some sex education. That just makes logical sense to me. My other specific concern about this bill is that we're going to have teachers now basically subject to open records requests. I think anybody in this room that's ever dealt with those knows that we have this 3-day rule where you got to let people know what's available, and no one likes it. No one likes dealing with it. It's hard. And now we're going to put that burden on teachers. If a parent comes up and asks for these materials, you got 3 days, 3 business days to get it out. And I know we have this 30-day period where you can say, well, we got some things, but they're not ready. But all this does is set up a fight and logistical nightmares for our teachers to deal with these requests for information, and then someone saying, oh, you didn't give me everything. I know there's got to be more. Talk about, yesterday in this chamber, I think everyone was clapping for kill all the lawyers. This is going to keep the lawyers pretty busy, trying to figure out what was and wasn't produced. And the last specific thing I want to touch on is we say that at any time, parents should be able to review instructional material. We're making this in code, and I don't have a problem with that, and I don't think most teachers would have a problem providing information, but instructional material is broad. It's defined in 20-2-1010 and 20-2-1017. It includes digital images, articles, music, videos. So what happens when a teacher tries to share current events in a video and an article or pull up a website, and then that's gone? Are we going to set up litigation because they didn't provide every little piece of instructional information to the parents? Those are the things I worry about, and I would urge you to vote no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Representative Allen to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today not in opposition to parents and parents' rights, but to oppose an election year ploy designed to win cheap political points and fuel campaign mailers. I rise in support of educators who we place such a high value on in this state. And over the past 2 years, we have called them essential workers because we have seen them step up and step in when called. We should be supporting the partnership between parents and educators, not undermining the public trust in educators and public education. One constituent summed it up best when he emailed me and said this, and it's a quote: "This is the worst education legislation I've ever seen. This is a solution in search of a problem, adding layers of bureaucracy and codifies many things parents can already do, and most schools are generally helpful with, talk through, reach common understanding in a cooperative manner," end quote. Now, it was even said in rules this morning, I wrote this down, that the two things we want to know is, why is this bill needed and how does it solve a problem? This legislation does neither. As these attacks on teachers and principals have moved through the process, I have not heard one story from a parent needing to legislate the parent-teacher relationship. So since I'm a parent of a public school child, let me tell you what I experience in the parent-teacher relationship. It's collaborative, it's built on trust, and it is between me, my wife, and the teacher. Such a personal relationship does not need to be codified. It needs to be individualized. Now, right now in Georgia, we have two critical workforce crises. We have educators and nurses, healthcare. As it relates to educators, what do you think this will do to recruitment when teachers and principals find out that they will be forced to drop everything they're doing and respond to an unlimited number of parent questions about the curriculum? Now, most of this they already share freely, along with their other immeasurable workloads. And now in this legislation, if not, they can be brought in front of a board for some undescribed punishment. And secondly, it could have a chilling impact on the open flow of information and dialogue that parents already have with teachers. Teachers will be on edge, not knowing what response to give or if the response will get them second-guessed or even terminated. Now, as a parent, I already have access to the curricula, the student attendance, grades, and even behavior. My teacher communicates with me frequently, if not daily, in a variety of ways, and welcomes the parent involvement. You see, good teaching involves assessment, planning, and real-time modification based on the child and the environment. It is unreasonable to expect educators to provide details weeks in advance of what they're going to teach. So let me try to explain the burden on our teachers this way. This is the equivalency of asking you to post what you will be eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the next 9 weeks. Be sure to list all the ingredients that you'll be using, where you purchased them, and any recipes, including the author and the publisher of the cookbooks. You list all the utensils and appliances used for preparing, serving, eating, cleaning up, and be sure to include your beverage choices and table condiments and any guest chefs that may come in and cook. Oh, and any restaurants. And furthermore, anyone you are feeding who disagrees with any of the meals you've prepared, they must be given an alternative meal, and you need to describe those meals too. Do you still want to be a teacher in Georgia? We need our teachers to feel supported and not constantly undermined and under attack. If there is an example of a problem, let's discuss it. But playing politics with my daughter's education and the children of Georgia is not acceptable. And I hope we vote down this measure and start finding real solutions to solve the real problems in our education system. This is not it. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Representative Roberts to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, colleagues. For those of you in the chamber who are parents, I bet you're like me. You'll never forget the first time you laid eyes on your child. When they laid my daughter in my arms for the first time, there was this overwhelming tsunami of just pure joy and love, only then to be met with equal parts of terror at the thought that not only do I have to keep this little creature alive till she's 18, but I also have to make sure that she's kind and a responsible human being. I'm proud to say I think I've done a pretty good job, as I'm about to send her off to college this fall. And I can say without absolute certainty that there is no other role I play in life, wife, daughter, friend, attorney, that informs me more than being a mother. So I want to start here, where I think all the parents in this chamber can agree that we want what's best for our kids. Unfortunately, this bill is not what's good for Georgia's children. When I sat down to really dig into the bill, just like any other bill, I started with the why. Why do we need this bill? Because we have such limited time to do the people's business in this chamber that I think we should strive to put forth bills that will do the most good for the most people. So I have to be honest, I really couldn't find the why as it relates to how it benefits Georgia families. The bill entitled the Parental Bill of Rights doesn't really grant many rights that we don't inherently or in law already have. Section 1 lays out, I think, 11 rights. I'm not going to go through them all, but the right to direct the education and health care of my child, the right to direct her upbringing and her moral training, the right and responsibility to enroll her in public school or move her to a private school or homeschool, the right to access and review all her school records, the right to make health care decisions. Y'all, we have all those rights. This is not doing anything new. Then we move into section 2, where school administrators and teachers are given their marching orders to comply with this parental Bill of Rights. We've heard proponents of this bill say that a lot of the procedures, if not all of them, are already in place, but that this measure centralizes the information. That may be true, but why? We're here passing a bill, we agree, that doesn't change much. It certainly doesn't address real concerns facing students or educators, like the $1 billion school funding shortfall we racked up for a decade. It doesn't fix our significant teacher shortage in this state, but rather exacerbates it. Instead, it seems to perpetuate a pattern that has been forming this session, that a few loud voices get to control at the expense of the majority how our local maps are drawn, and hear what our children learn in school. What this bill does do is put another administrative burden on teachers and another avenue to open them up to criticism. I've had teachers tell me that through the ordeal of being sent back to the classroom with fewer protections against COVID, they've been made to feel like glorified babysitters. And that's nothing against our amazing child care providers of our state. But our teachers deserve better. They're tired and frustrated by a state government whose idea of backing them up is a long overdue raise that amounts to little more than a cost of living adjustment, which should be the floor. They are overwhelmed and overburdened. Now you may say this bill isn't for the teachers, it's about parents. The alleged intent is to require a plan for parental participation. I can't remember a single time in the history of my child's education that I didn't know how I could participate, whether it was in the PTA, volunteering in the classroom or the library. I attended every parent school night, every parent-teacher conference. I heard about what she was learning because I asked her about it every day after school. I looked at her books she brought home. The websites all provide the curriculum online. I saw this as my responsibility as a parent to take that initiative. I've never felt like I couldn't contact our teachers or the principal if I had a concern. But what I have never expected is that because I'm a Catholic, I have the right to demand my religion be taught at the exclusion of others or even taught about. I never expected that I could demand my child to forego immunizations that have been required for decades for the benefit of public health. In a recent AJC guest column by a 15-year teacher from Milton High School who has won Teacher of the Year twice, she sounds the alarm about how the teaching profession is in crisis and our children are going to pay the price. She describes how it's really no one's fault. It's been this perfect storm, a death by 1,000 paper cuts. There have been a couple of recent studies that have come out that estimate that 1 in 4 teachers are thinking about quitting, and that 40% of their colleagues actually did quit. So think about that. If 1 in 4 of our teachers are thinking about it and 40% quit, y'all, we are in trouble. She provides some suggestions for improving things, and none are about pay raises. The one I found most compelling, and interestingly enough, my mom is a retired high school English teacher, and she said the very same thing. They suggest requiring parent volunteer hours, 8 per semester. Not per kid, just 8 per semester if you have multiple kids. And the rationale is that part of the biggest problems of education could be solved if parents just went into those school buildings and spent time. They would see how hard everyone is working to help kids feel safe and successful. Community is missing, and we've got to bring it back. This bill is not the way. Bottom line, I know that this bill is going to be used against Democrats during the election season with statements that say, we're against parents. Y'all, I am a parent that takes my job very seriously and my child's education very seriously. So I want to say right here publicly on the record that I take offense to this. I believe that this bill, which doesn't really do anything substantially except further burden our underpaid and overworked teachers who deserve our respect, is not good for our children. Being a good parent sometimes means putting our kids' needs above our own. If you agree, vote no to this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the will.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. We have a minority report and we have the chairman's time. 20 minutes by rule for each. The chair recognizes Representative Holland to give the minority report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I know we're reaching that point in the session when we are here for longer days and we're often scuttling off to the anteroom to have private conversations during the day. And so if any of you are looking for some good conversation, I would be happy to talk to anyone about the Harlem Renaissance or decimal fraction operations or microorganisms, propositions and conjugations, electricity and magnetism, the Constitution and her amendments, or the difference between similes, metaphors, idioms, and hyperbole. In fact, if you remember that Jeff Foxworthy show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? If anyone has the mobile home version of that game, I will challenge you to a duel. Let's see who's smarter than a fifth grader. And before you wonder what sort of bizarre reading habits I have, it's just that I'm the parent of a fifth grader. So all of these topics have been discussed widely in my house over the past few months. I rise today to talk about this bill because I'm part of a small contingent of people in this chamber who are current parents of K through 12 public school students. And it occurred to me that I might be the only person in this chamber who had to come up with a way to make a model of an animal cell using only edible ingredients a couple of months ago. And by the way, for cell membrane, Twizzlers work really well, but red vines probably would have worked better. It's been a while since some of you have been engaged in public schools, so I want to talk about how things have evolved and changed to make sure that there is transparency for parents into the curriculum at the schools. The old ways still exist, the parent-teacher conferences, the curriculum night. My child still comes home every Friday with a red folder in his backpack that has notices and graded work from the week. But the way the school districts can now leverage technology gives me insight into his classroom that I never could have had even 10 years ago. With Seesaw and Google Classroom and Infinite Campus and IXL and the Securely app, I have insight into what he does every day. Every Sunday evening, I can expect to get 2 messages, one from his class homeroom teacher telling me what they're going to be studying that week and what methods they're going to be using, what kind of activities they'll be doing, and one from his principal telling me what the SEL objectives are going to be for that week. And then I sometimes hear from his art teacher or his music teacher or his PE teacher, so I also know what's going on during his specials time. If I have a question or a concern, I reach out to his teachers through these apps. I often hear back within the hour. If I think my child needs special accommodations, I ask for them, and they're met every time. When the teacher hasn't been able to meet those for me, I've been able to escalate it to the principal. And that's always worked for me, but if it hadn't, there's a mechanism for me to escalate it again. And I wanted to come up here today and I wanted to be able to say, at no time ever before has there been more transparency into my child's curriculum than there is right now. But that would be a lie. A little less than 2 years ago, I had more transparency into what happened in my child's classroom than I ever want to have again. Because that's when our kids went to virtual school while we tried to mitigate the spread of the coronavirus. And I sat next to him and I got to see every second in real time what was happening with him and his classmates and his teachers. And y'all, I was blown away. With about a day's notice, those teachers had to pivot and learn to instruct in a manner that they had never been trained to do, to move those kids out of a physical classroom into a Zoom classroom. A recorder got delivered to my house because the 4th grade music curriculum includes recorder instruction, and if you think I was ever inside my house from 9:30 to 10:10 on Thursday mornings, I was not, while the 4th grader learned how to play the recorder online. And I looked to social media and my email groups and chats with friends, and this is what they said. We should be paying these teachers $1 million. When the pandemic is over, we should all chip in and send our child's teacher on a Caribbean cruise. From now on, my household budget's going to mean sending a case of wine monthly to my child's teacher because I had no idea. How soon we forget, y'all. That was less than 2 years ago, and now we want to burden our teachers. We say, we don't trust you. We need to know everything that you're going to be discussing with our children. We need to know it in advance, and heaven forbid you deviate from that. Heaven forbid when one of these kids gets super excited about learning about the Bill of Rights and wants to dive deeper into where they came from. Sorry, you can't teach that now. That wasn't part of the curriculum that you submitted to us months ago. I'm not going to provide a retread of what my colleagues have already told you line by line in this bill. This puts a burden on teachers and creates problematic contradictions in what we expect from our education system. But I got to tell you, we've got a dire shortage of teachers in this state. We are having trouble retaining and recruiting not just top talent, but talent in general in our schools. And this bill does the opposite of fixing that problem. I know we have a long day ahead, so to sum up, this bill is not necessary, and it inadvertently causes harm to our teachers, which by definition causes harm to our kids. So on behalf of my child and the children in your communities, I'd like to ask you to say no to this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
All right, we're going to have the chairman's time now. Chair recognizes Chairman Dubnik for the chairman's time, 20 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I'm going to do my best to get through this today and get my point across, and I'm going to start with 2 words, necessity and transparency. And I'm going to end with a story about the need for transparency. So I hope you'll indulge me for a few minutes. This bill is absolutely necessary. This is not controversial. This is about parents and parents' access to transparency. As legislators, I don't understand how we could vote against parents' rights. And I believe parents should have the right to do the following: the right to direct the upbringing and the moral or religious training of their child, the right to review all instructional materials intended for use in the classroom, the right to apply to enroll a child in a public school, an alternative to public education, a private school, religious school, a home study program, or other options that are authorized by law and subject to applicable enrollment requirements. The right to access and review all records relating to this minor child, including but not limited to current grade reports, attendance records, unless they're prohibited in other areas of the law. The right to access information relating to promotion and retention policies and high school graduation requirements. Now let's talk about the purpose of this bill. This strengthens parents' rights in law. Currently, most are done by board rule, but board rule is easily undone. Law is not. Board rule is easily undone, but law is not. Currently, the law only has student records and student data as information that must be available to the parent. This bill puts instructional materials and other information in that same category. And let me say this too, as it was stated earlier, I believe incorrectly, this bill does not include ingredients, also known as supplemental materials. It's just primary materials that are already readily available via locally approved and State Board of Education approved materials. This centralizes and streamlines the process for a parent to get information while providing an alternative to the open records route, which costs the parent money. It allows access to information not currently accessible to parents under the law, and it codifies parents' rights and the responsibility of the local school system all in one place. Currently, the rights and information are all over the code, state regulations, local regulations, and this will make it easier for districts and parents to understand their roles. Now, the question was posed earlier, why would you still want to be a teacher in Georgia? And I would counter that from the place of a parent. Would we ever ask the question, why would anyone still want to be a parent? Absolutely not. We would never ask that question. This is about parents and students and families. And I talked to you about transparency, and now I'm going to get personal. It was also stated, why would we want teachers and administrators to respond to requests and interactions for parents? Now, if you're on the education committee and you were in subcommittee, you've already heard my story twice. So I apologize. Hopefully the third time's the charm. But for the other members who haven't heard my personal story, I'm going to answer that question very directly and very purposefully. Why would we want teachers and administrators to respond to interactions to understand what ingredients? I'm going to use that analogy that was already given. Well, ingredients hit home right here. Because I have a child with severe food allergies. Not the kind that we say are preference. The kind that are life and death. I've been in the hospital to find out that we have those allergies. I ask questions about what's in the food, who's cooking it, where are we going on the field trip, did that child wash their hands after they ate that pizza full of gluten before they threw the football with my child. It's about transparency. And as a parent, I expect and demand answers to things about ingredients in my child's food. And I will demand the same transparency in the ingredients that are a part of my child's education, and would hope that you would demand the same for your child's education. When we go to the hospital, we have loved ones who are sick, and Lord knows I'm dealing with that on a very personal level right now. Would you want to go in and just hear, we gave you some medicine, your wife got treatment and medicine, and we hope it works? Well, doctor, what was it? What did you do, Doc Newton? Well, that's a burden to me, Mr. Dubnik. I wish you wouldn't have asked that question. We demand transparency to advocate for the health care and the well-being of our loved ones. You would advocate for your loved one, and you would ask about transparency and what was in that medicine. I ask about ingredients that are in my child's food. And there's a very short list of people that we allow to cook for my child. You know why? Because we're the advocate. We need that transparency. I'll end with this. This is for parents who care. This is our chance as legislators to tell the people of Georgia that we care about them and the rights that they need, the rights that they demand, and the rights that they deserve to understand what is going on with their child's education. This is necessary, and this is needed transparency. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I will yield the balance of my time to others who wish to speak to the bill.
Speaker Pro Tem, are you speaking to the balance of the time? Chair recognizes the Speaker Pro Tem of the House for the balance of the chairman's time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll just take a minute before I do defer to the author of the bill, the governor's floor leader. I just want to allay a few fears that have been expressed so that you can feel comfortable voting for this bill. Number one, current law allows parents to opt their children out of sex education up to the age 18. This bill doesn't change that. The legislation also does not change the current definition of sex education in law. So have no fear, we're not changing that. And if you think it's ambiguous, please bring some legislation this year or next. I also heard that the legislation would foment mistrust between parents and educators. Well, I adhere to the old saying, trust but verify. I would suggest that the bill will lead to more trust between educators and parents because they'll be aware more of what their rights are as opposed to wondering. You know, not every parent has the time, frankly, to volunteer in their schools. I was one of the lucky ones. I had the time to do that. But there are many parents who wish they could give up to 8 hours a week or 8 hours a semester or a year, but they don't have the time. Many parents are working parents, and it's the best they can do to put the food on the table. And so allowing them to online or through paper documentation know what their instructional materials are, what their rights are, saves everybody a lot of time and energy, and particularly those who are working the hardest and the single parents. I'd also like to suggest that it, it'll lead, the prospect that it'll lead to more questions by parents. You know, my gosh, is that disturbing that parents might have questions about what their children are learning or how they're learning it? I actually think that's an indicator of quality parenting. And I would like to do anything that I can to encourage that, whether it's what your child eats or what they're learning in public school. So that there's been some have talked about how disturbing it is that teachers will be burdened because of having to make instructional materials available. Well, I looked actually in code at what are instructional materials, and these are not supplemental, but these are the materials that are already adopted by the school system or utilized by the school system. So first of all, it doesn't necessarily mean that a teacher will have to make these materials available. They can be made available on the website. My goodness, if a school system can make the lunch menu available every dang day and every dang week of the year, I think they can make those instructional materials available online that the teachers are using that were adopted by the school system or used by the school system. And then the requirement that, we're adding a lot of rights, as has been said. Most of these rights are already in law, and if you don't like them, please bring legislation. We can talk about it through the committee process. What the bill primarily does is it takes these rights and it just makes sure that those of us who are down here making laws and we might know about them, let's let the people who are subject to these laws that we pass be aware of them. And that's the parents whose children are required by law to attend school, whether homeschool, private school, or in the case of 90% of students in Georgia, public school. I do think they should be aware of the laws that we passed down here, that we all agreed, or at least a majority of us agreed, that we should put in place on our public schools. And again, if you don't like them, bring it on and let's talk about it in the committee process if you already think it's too much of a burden. And finally, I do want to bring up something about teachers and how teachers are dissatisfied. I looked at that. Y'all can look it up yourself. Go see the Professional Standards Commission that regulates teacher licensing. The teacher leaving rate hasn't changed in 20 years. This bill isn't going to change it. Now, one thing that might help is the pay raise that Governor Kemp has suggested, because we haven't been able to keep teacher pay in keeping, particularly with the inflation rate we have today, but in general over the last 20 years, because it took us a long time to come out of the Great Recession. The only time we saw teachers coming out of teaching educational institutions not being able to get hired was during a great recession or a regular recession when we have to increase the class sizes because we don't have the money. If you have a solution for that, let me know. Right now, the reason there's tremendous shortage of teachers is because, one, we have such an inflation rate, they need to go get a job that pays better. Maybe you can talk to President Biden about working on that. Number two, because there are other options that pay better right now out in the marketplace. But I encourage you to wait around, stick around to the next recession, and that may change. I love our teachers, and I think most of us down here do. My children had some of the best experiences of their lives in public education in North Fulton. I don't think this bill is going to increase or decrease teacher satisfaction. It certainly doesn't put an additional burden on them. What it does do is provide teachers with parents with what they should have, which is greater access, greater input, and an ability to be more involved in their schools, which I think we would all agree is a mighty good thing. And I would encourage you to vote for this legislation. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Bonner now for the remainder of the chairman's time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be brief. I appreciate all the debate, all the comments. I had to check with the clerk, though, just a minute ago, because it seems as though those that are in opposition to the bill may be looking at the wrong bill. Because as I look through House Bill 1178 and I look through the comments that were made by those that spoke in the well against this, I could not find what they were talking about. So I would encourage you, do not give in to the fear that's been propagated today. I have 2 kids in college, and I still have 2 kids at home, one an 8th grader and one a 1st grader. I have the honor to represent the community that I grew up in. So when I go to take my kids to school each and every day, I'm dropping them off with the people that I went to school with, that I grew up with. I'm interacting with the administrators and the board members that I went to school with, I know, that I grew up with. And I can tell you, I have no desire to put any one of our teachers, our administrators, our board members, any of those in any situation where there'd be any kind of punitive action. I would submit to you that if we increase the transparency and the communication between our teachers and our parents, it will actually create an environment that will attract teachers. One of our colleagues discussed one of the roadmaps of success with having volunteers in the classroom. Absolutely. I think what this bill does is provide a framework that encourages that. So not to belabor the point, but I would certainly ask for your favorable consideration for House Bill 1178. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative McLeod rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
As a parent and a grandparent, and once upon a time, a single parent, I want to know how exactly, I guess I was powerless at that point, and can I be explained how this is going to empower me more than it did 35 years ago and with my 6-year-old grandson today?
Chair recognizes Representative Camp. For what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary
State
inquiry.
your inquiry.
Is it not true that transparency in lesson plans and curriculums by making information more readily available to parents will create a partnership instead of a spectatorship between parents and teachers?
If the lady believes that to be true, I'm sure she is sincere in that belief. What purpose does Representative Hagan rise.
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that as a former classroom teacher that I welcomed parents in my classroom and would not have felt the least bit threatened or burdened by their involvement in their child's education?
I'm sure the lady knows that to be true. What purpose does Representative Anulowitz rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it not true that this bill would hold teachers and educators to an open record standards far greater than that to which we hold ourselves?
If the lady interprets it that way, I'm sure she believes it to be that way. All right, final inquiry here. What purpose does Representative McLaurin rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, is it not true that words like transparency and argumentative styles like "we're just asking questions, what do you have to hide" is the same sort of strategy employed by extremists on the election context as well, and that if this chamber had more foresight, it would recognize that it's creating the same kind of mess with base voters with regard to these education issues also that will end up biting us all later when we realize that we've eroded trust and put stress on our institutions to a point that we can't recover from. Is that not true, Mr. Speaker?
That was quite a parliamentary inquiry, Representative. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 1178. The ayes are 98, the nays are 68. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1352.
House Bill 1352 by Representative Smith, the 133rd, to be entitled an act to amend Article 5 of Chapter 12 of Title 44 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating the disposition of unclaimed property so as to provide for the handling of certain wills. This bill having referred to the Committee on Judiciary, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Vance Smith to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're working off a Committee of Rules substitute LC 442036S. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a large amount of unclaimed property in the Department of Revenue, and looking at some of the statistics comparing Georgia with the nation and other states, we only return about 9% of that to the claimants. So we want to up that return rate. The national average is 38%. If you use a state for an example, Florida would be a good one. Their return rate's 59%. But this legislation, nothing's been updated in this code since 1990. So that's what we're working here today. This bill, some people ask questions about documents like wills and trust. None of that is destroyed. All those are kept. The records are kept electronically and paper. So none of that's destroyed. We also have companies that actually perform this service, which will give the citizens of the state of Georgia another option to go bring their unclaimed property back home to them. It gives a criteria of how those companies register. They do a background check. When they do talk to someone about helping them, they have to perform a contract. In that contract, it states what they will charge. It also states what the amount of money that will go back to the claimant, the citizens of Georgia. So it's laid out specifically. Those people that do have a clean background check and do want to provide that service, they'll pay a $1,200 fee. That fee runs for 4 years. They have to come back and pay that again at the end of that 4 years. So it's strictly voluntary. This is just another option for our citizens of the state of Georgia. I don't know if any of you have had the chance to try to work with the Department of Revenue and go bring some unclaimed property home. Interesting process. So Also, this legislation, the effective date is not until January 1 of 2023. That will give the department some time to update all their records, any kind of computer software that they need to have. But we don't have to worry about jeopardizing anybody's social security number, federal ID number, or any important personal background. All that is still kept confidential. So, Mr. Speaker, I'll be glad to answer any questions, and certainly would appreciate your favorable consideration.
Do you yield for questions?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Chairman Houston to your right for a question.
Isn't it not true that these companies charge 30% to do this?
In the bill, it says right now it's 10%. These companies can charge up to 30%.
Well, isn't it not true that I provide this to my constituents already by putting a book out in the libraries and the county commissioner's office about everybody that has money? And isn't it not true we need to make our citizens more alert? And isn't it not true if you get 30%, you need to be paying more than $1,200 to get in business? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you coming to me ahead of time, Ms. Penny. Chairman Houston, and talking to me. Thank you very much.
Do you further yield?
I'll yield for one more.
Chair recognizes Representative Cannon to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do you yield?
Yes, ma'am.
How did the Council of Probate Court judges feel about this bill?
In the first subcommittee meeting on judiciary, which this bill went through, they were on a Zoom call. They offered information. I want to say it was lines 86 through 88 and 101 to 110. We took verbatim their language and put this in the bill.
Do you further yield?
Yes, ma'am.
And so on line 148, it implicates the Superior Court of Fulton County. How do they feel about the bill?
I cannot speak directly to that because nobody contacted me about line 148. It did pass.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Have another member that wishes to speak to the bill. Chair recognizes Representative Wilkerson to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the author of 1352 for bringing this bill forward. I expressed some of the same concerns about the percentage. I believe that we need to get people their money back. I think that's important, but I don't think this is the right way to have third parties do it. Other states, I know North Carolina, what they've done is they made it easier to reclaim your property. So for example, anything up to, I believe, $5,000, you can just send information on who you are and they send you the money right back. So I think it's a very important issue, and I like the idea about publishing who has unclaimed property out there, because I know right now I go to unclaimedproperty.org and search across the country to see if there's any money out there. So I think that what we need to do is make it easier for people to get the money back, not give it to a third party. I think already right now citizens get confused on what's legitimate public information versus when they get these scam companies. And so I just ask us to basically turn down this bill and then come back with something that actually makes it, easier for people to get their money instead of giving it to outside companies. And I ask for you to vote no, and I do thank the author for highlighting this issue, and I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to withdrawing the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is withdrawn. Is there any objection to adopting the substitute offered by the Committee on Rules? The chair hears none. The Rules Committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 1352. The ayes are 115, the nays are 47. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1377.
House Bill 1377 by Representative Burchetta, the 176, and others to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 7 of Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia and Tedder relating to general provisions relative to income taxes so as to authorize private causes of action for equitable relief regarding the failure of employers to comply with revenue provisions regarding employees. This bill having referred to the Committee on Judiciary. The committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Burchett to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues, for allowing me to come here and present to you. This bill, I'm going to be brief because I understand I'm standing between you and lunch. So this bill attempts to address the misclassification issue. You had another bill before you earlier this session already, Representative Jones has, and essentially what my bill does here is to say that if there is a business not classifying their employees correctly, it gives a right of action to any person to take them to Superior Court and get an injunctive relief or stop them from acting in that manner. There is no punitive damages. I was capable of getting the business community on board with this concept, and there is a provision in there so as to not make this a weapon that requires that if you take someone to court and believe they're doing this but you are wrong, you will have to pay attorney's fees on both sides. That is the gist of the bill. This is a means to enforce the laws that are already on the books in the state of Georgia, a means to stop this misclassification issue that is pervasive throughout the state. And Mr. Speaker, that's all I have to say, and I'll stand for questions if necessary.
You have a question if you care to yield.
Yes, sir, I yield.
Chair recognizes Chairman Petrie for a question to your left.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir, I yield.
Is it not true that employers that are intentionally misclassifying workers is a common problem throughout the state?
Yes, sir, I believe so.
And does the gentleman further yield?
Yes, sir, I yield.
Is it not true that when we allow that unfettered, that we actually discourage all those employers from following the law and doing it right?
I 100% agree with you, and thank you for the question. This is a provision that would go after the bad actors, the folks that are not following the law, and I encourage your support of this bill, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 1377. The ayes are 157. The nays are 4. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. This House will be in recess for lunch until 1:30 p.m.